I stared at Gabriella, who was sitting quietly beside my hospital bed. Ordinary friends, I repeated, trying to keep my voice even, but those two words felt like a slap. She wasn't joking. Her expression was distant, cold even. I had opened, my eyes hoping she'd crack a smile or tease me for pretending to forget. Instead, I got a wall. Gotcha, was what I wanted to say, maybe lighten the mood. But the words caught in my throat, and I ended up just staring at her. Honestly, if the doctor hadn't called her, I doubt she would have come at all, but I didn't press her on it. I hesitated for a second, then forced a smile. So, that's really kind of you, I said lightly, hoping she'd soften. She just gave a half-hearted, like I was wasting her time. Then she looked down at her phone, tapped the screen, and stood up. Well, you're awake now. I've got work, she said bluntly, already walking toward the door. Right as she opened it, maybe out of guilt, she turned and said, Rest well. The door clicked shut behind her, and I sat there staring at the wall. The smile I'd been faking vanished instantly. No one knew Gabriella and I were in a relationship. We'd started dating back in college, sophomore year, and after graduation, we both moved south and landed jobs at the top marketing firm in South City. We were ambitious, hungry, and in love. But office romances were risky, so we kept it quiet. 4 years passed, and we both climbed the ranks to become business managers, leading rival teams no less. That gave us even more reason to stay silent about our relationship. I'd suggested a few times that maybe it was time to go public. It wasn't like the company banned it outright, but she always brushed it off, distracted, unbothered, and lately I wasn't even sure we were still a couple. Today, I got my answer. The doctor told her I might have temporary memory loss, but he also said I should recover soon. Still, without missing a beat, she told me we were just ordinary friends. She didn't even flinch. Whether I was really amnesiac or just joking didn't matter to her. Maybe she'd been waiting for an excuse to end things. After all, if we were still together, how could she openly chase after Diego? People say women have a sixth sense, but men? Sometimes our gut is sharper than radar. Truth is, things had been off between Gabriella and me for a while. 7 years together, from college to now. We knew each other better than anyone. So when she started acting different, it was impossible not to notice. It began when a new intern joined her team. Diego, tall, charming, polished. His name sounded familiar, and soon enough HR let it slip. His father is Pablo Lee, the owner of our company, a silver spoon intern in Daddy's empire. When I asked about him, Gabriella just shrugged. He's not my type, and let's be honest, offending. Him wouldn't be smart. I let it go, trusted her. A few weeks later, I logged into an old music account we used to share, trying to find some background music. To my surprise, she was active on it again. She hadn't touched that account in years. We used to listen together back in college, clocked nearly 9,000 hours of shared music. She even had a playlist named after me, full of love songs and tracks. I'd sent her songs from our long-distance days during winter breaks. But that playlist? Gone. Deleted. Instead, her recent activity was full of K-pop, something she never used to care about. Diego, on the other hand, was always talking about it. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just trying to stay hip with younger staff. I logged out quietly, said nothing. I'm not the type to jump to conclusions without proof. Sometimes the one who stays quiet is the one who lasts the longest. But then came February. Gabriella was leading a new project with her team. I was in another city with my own assignment, so we barely saw each other. One night, I called her after a long, exhausting day. She didn't answer. I sent a text. No reply. Later, I saw a post on her social media, a group photo with Diego beside, her beaming like it was a vacation, not work. Her caption, "Know yourself, know your enemy." Diego had posted something similar. Victory in every battle. Cute. Coordinated captions like some inside joke. I clicked into their profiles. Both had updated status messages matching those phrases. I checked the comments. Gabriella had replied, "To Diego, eat quickly, take care of your stomach." Meanwhile, I was sitting alone, my own stomach growling because I hadn't eaten either. I turned off my phone. That was the second time I chose to stay quiet. 3 days later, the doctor signed off on my discharge. I was officially fine, not a single message from Gabriella. Well, unless you count the bouquet she sent, cappuccino-colored. Flowers. Beautiful, carefully arranged. No note. Sitting in the quiet hospital hallway with the flowers in my lap, I told myself maybe she deserved one last chance. Maybe she was just overwhelmed, so I called her. It took her a long time to pick up the phone. I kept my voice gentle. "Gabriella, I'm being discharged today. Do you have time to come pick me up?" We both pretended like the words amnesia and ordinary friends were never spoken, as if none of it ever happened. There was silence on the line. Then she finally said, "I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm really busy and can't get away. I can call a car for you?" "What are you busy with?" I asked, trying to keep my tone calm. She hesitated. I think she was caught off guard. I wasn't. The type to press her. Not like this. I'd always tried to be understanding, thoughtful, but I knew her workload. Our first quarter project had just wrapped, and this was usually the slowest time of the season. She didn't answer. I sighed and hung up. Sometimes love doesn't disappear. It just stops trying. And when it stops trying, the silence says it all. I couldn't help but remember another time. Just after we graduated, I once had a terrible bout of gastroenteritis. It hit me in the middle of the night, around 3 a.m. I barely managed to call her before I passed out. When I came to, she was there, sitting beside my hospital bed, eyes red from crying. She had one foot in a slipper and the other in a sneaker. Both, left-footed. I actually smiled when I saw her like that. She scolded me through tears. "You're still smiling?" "I thought you were going to die at the door. You scared me to death." I just looked at her and said, "In my heart, you're the safest person I know." There was a time she cared like that. There was a time we loved each other fiercely, honestly, but that time feels like a lifetime ago. I glanced down at the cappuccino-colored bouquet someone had sent, a little too perfectly arranged, not quite her style. I tossed it into the trash nearby. A voice behind me asked, "Didn't like the flowers?" I turned around to see a man I didn't recognize. He looked a little apologetic. "I'm the driver, the one who hit you yesterday. I brought you to the hospital and left after contacting your emergency contact. These are from me. And I paid the hospital bill too. I'm really sorry for the trouble." I let out a quiet laugh. Even the flowers weren't from Gabriella. "I'm sorry," I told him politely. "I thought they were from someone else." Inside, something sank a little deeper. I've always been calm, collected, polite. But politeness doesn't mean I'm blind or weak. Gabriella and I were over. That much is clear now. When I got home from the hospital, Gabriella was already there. She was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, smiling at whatever was on her screen. The TV was on, playing some variety, show she never even liked. I paused for a moment at the door, watching her. The glow of the screen lit her face. She looked content, relaxed, like she hadn't once worried about me. She didn't even notice I'd come in until I softly said her name. "Gabriella," she flinched, quickly hiding the smile and locking her phone, placing its screen down on the couch. "You're discharged?" she asked, startled. I gave her a faint smile. "Yeah." Then I added, "Let's talk." There wasn't any drama, no raised voices, no tears, just two people sitting across from each other, knowing something had run its course. When I said, "Let's break up," she didn't ask why. She just went quiet. And I think that silence held a bit of relief for her. Eventually she said, "I'm sorry." I didn't say anything to that. I didn't accept the apology. I just calmly started discussing what to do next. Who would move out? How we'd divide the bills? She blinked in surprise. Daniel, you don't seem sad at all. Her voice was a little tight, like she couldn't figure out how to feel. I didn't answer right away. Women, people really are funny sometimes. Even if they're the ones who've checked out, there's still a part of them that wants to see you fall apart. They want confirmation that they mattered. But I had already gone through the sadness. I grieved when she stopped replying to my messages, but had time to comment on Diego's social media. I grieved when she deleted the playlist she once made for me and started filling her life with songs Diego liked. I grieved when she stood by my hospital bed and told me we were just ordinary friends. I had already buried my feelings quietly, like pulling a splinter you don't want anyone to see. To me, Gabriella had become like a benign tumor. Not deadly, but slowly draining me, and the best thing to do was remove it. Before it turned worse. As she finished packing, I asked her one last thing. Did you stop loving me because Diego is Pablo's son, or just because he's him? She paused at the door, turning back to look at me. The same face from college, only more mature, more composed. Somewhere along the way, the girl who used to blush while confessing on the playground had become someone else. She looked me in the eye and said, Daniel, people always want to reach higher. I let out a soft laugh. At least she was honest. Well, 70% honest. I hope you make it to the top, Gabriella, I said, meaning it. I really do. Her eyes lingered on mine. Maybe there was a trace of regret, but ambition always wins out over sentiment. Finally, she whispered, Don't hate me. I didn't reply. The thing about office romances is, breakups don't mean disappearance. You still see them. Every day. You still pass each other in the halls. Sit in the same meetings. Smile at the same clients. You break up, but the ghost of what you had follows you to work, and that, more than anything, might be the hardest part. When the taxi pulled up in front of the company, I spotted Gabriella and Diego among a group of their colleagues. It was lunchtime. They were likely heading out to eat together. Diego was animated, talking with a bright smile on his face. His back was to the street as he gestured excitedly toward Gabriella. She watched him with a gentle smile, occasionally, pulling his arm to steer him away from oncoming people. The scene felt both familiar and foreign. Gabriella looked happy. Happier than she'd ever looked with me, at least that's how it felt. I stayed in the car, watching them until they disappeared into the Hong Kong-style tea house nearby. The taxi driver glanced at me through the mirror, curiosity in his voice. Are you secretly in love with that pretty girl? I smiled faintly and replied, She's my ex. His expression instantly changed, curiosity turning into awkward sympathy. He opened his mouth, searching for something to say, but I saved him the trouble. It's fine, I said. Doesn't affect me. When I walked into the office, Bella lit up as she rushed over. Daniel, you're out of the hospital, she exclaimed. You should have let us visit you. I smiled, walking toward my office. It wasn't serious. And look, I'm back, right? She followed me in, holding a stack of documents. I've got the Hong Kong case updates here, she said, handing them to me. Then she glanced around, hesitated, and leaned in a little. Her voice dropped. Don't look at the data yet. I need to tell you something. I set the papers down, raising an eyebrow. She looked troubled. You know Albert's leaving for Nanjing next month, she said. Everyone's been talking about who's going to take over as director. It's probably between you and Gabriella. I stayed quiet. Bella continued. Honestly, either of you would be a fair choice. You've both been neck and neck performance-wise. Then she bit her lip, visibly uncomfortable. But a few days ago, I saw Gabriella and Diego hugging in the break room. The way she said it told me everything. Diego, the rumored son of our boss Pablo. She was upset, because if Gabriella was involved with him, it might tip the scales unfairly in her favor. I slowly rolled the edge of the document in my hand, feeling something bitter rise in my chest. So, while I was lying in a hospital bed, Wondering why Gabriella hadn't reached out even once, she was cozying up with a rich second-generation air. I gave a small laugh. "Don't worry," I told Bella. "Promotions are decided by upper management. We just do our jobs and let the chips fall where they may." Bella sighed, and I turned back to the stack of data. Later that day, Gabriella knocked on my office door. I wasn't expecting her. Our breakup had been clean, polite, not messy, no screaming, no drama, but that didn't mean we could go back to chatting like normal colleagues. I thought we'd keep our distance unless absolutely necessary. She walked in, calm and poised. Her eyes met mine and held them. "I thought you'd resign," she said flatly. There was a note in her voice somewhere, between persuasion and warning. "We were together for 7 years, Daniel. I'm not trying to be heartless, but with Albert leaving next month, one of us will be promoted. If I were you, I'd start planning for something else." It was clear what she meant. She was confident she'd get the position. With Diego on her side, and with who he might be, she likely would. She wasn't just suggesting I leave. She was giving me a friendly warning. Once she became director, she'd probably push me out just to avoid office gossip. I stared at her, a strange mix of disbelief and clarity settling over me. I could understand love fading. That happens, but I didn't expect her to throw away basic decency. "You're trash, Gabriella," I said quietly. She didn't react, just stood there. My first direct run-in with Diego came about a week later. Gabriella, who once insisted we keep our relationship a secret because office romances weren't smart, was now flaunting her new love all over social media. Colleagues posted congratulations under their pictures. Friends from college, people who knew both of us, messaged me on WeChat, stunned. I didn't respond. It was a normal afternoon. Most people were out for lunch or half asleep at their desks. I was in the break room grinding coffee beans, enjoying the scent of fresh grounds when I heard someone behind me. Diego. I stepped aside to let him pass, but he didn't move. Instead, he just stood there, looking at me. "I know you and Gabby. Used to be together," he said. "Gabby." The way he said it, sweet and possessive. He had a baby face and was shorter than me. I looked down at him calmly, not saying a word. He seemed to expect more of a reaction. When he didn't get it, he looked slightly disappointed. "I saw the playlist she made with your name on it," he added. "You guys weren't very good at hiding things." I stayed silent. Let him keep talking. "My dad really likes Gabriella. Says she reminds him of himself when he was younger. Wants to mentor her. Gabriella has a bright future and I like her a lot too. She likes me." Then came the real reason he was here. "But your presence here, it's a bit inconvenient. I was hoping you'd be smart enough to resign on your own." I took a sip of my coffee, smiled slightly. "Mr. Lee, if you're here to fire me, I believe HR handles terminations. If that's what this is, please have them contact me with a formal explanation." His face went pale. I continued, "Also, any personnel changes involving managers or above require personal approval from the chairman. So the only person in this company who can actually fire me is him, not an intern." I gave him a polite nod and walked out. Not long after, Albert's transfer to Nanjing was officially announced. The chairman organized a farewell banquet. All management-level staff were invited, but everyone knew the dinner wasn't just to say goodbye to Albert. It was a prelude to major changes coming at the company's top level. Just as I returned to my desk, the HR manager placed an invitation envelope in front of me, and so the next chapter was about to begin. Only Bella looked pale. She was someone I had personally mentored. Leaning over her desk, she gave me a small smile and said, "Good luck." Then, after a pause, her voice grew more serious. "Daniel, no matter what happens, the team is behind you. If things fall apart here, we'll follow you wherever you go." I chuckled and gently tapped her forehead with the dinner invitation. "What are you talking about? It's just a meal," I said lightly. "Have you forgotten my motto? Build bridges when you encounter water, pave roads when you meet mountains. What's there to be afraid of?" I grinned. "Besides, I'm not the one who's going to lose." I felt surprisingly calm the night of the dinner. In the private room, Heads of marketing, HR, finance, and various department leads were seated around the long table. Chairman Pablo was at the head, Diego on his left, and right beside him, Gabriela. People stole glances at each other when they noticed Diego seated next to Pablo. Until now, it had just been a rumor. But seeing the intern sitting next to the chairman confirmed what many had quietly suspected. Still, Pablo didn't say a word about him, so everyone pretended not to notice. I sat next to Sister Bai from finance, quietly eating and drinking, speaking when it was appropriate, staying silent when it wasn't. No one talked about business. The dinner was officially to honor Albert, celebrating her contributions and wishing her well on her transfer to the Nanjing branch. It wasn't until the meal was nearly over, after the toasts and polite words, that Pablo finally set down his chopsticks and cleared his throat. He looked good for his early 50s. Sharp eyes, a firm jawline, a presence that commanded attention. He slowly wiped his mouth with a napkin before speaking. Besides bidding Albert farewell, there's one more matter I'd like to bring up. I placed my chopsticks down and looked toward him. From the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Gabriela. She wore a faint smile, poised and graceful as ever, sitting beside Diego like the picture-perfect couple. I lowered my gaze and quietly wiped my hands with the towel beside me. Pablo's voice was calm and steady. As you all know, I only have one son. When he graduated, I arranged for him to work at the company, but he's always been fiercely independent, didn't want anyone knowing who he was, wanted to earn his place from the bottom. He paused to let that sink in. And he did. I've heard many of you speak highly of him without realizing who he was. That made me proud. He smiled and looked straight at me. With Albert heading to Nanjing, now seems like the right time to formally introduce him. And then, with unmistakable warmth in his voice, he said, "Daniel, come over here to your father. It's time everyone met you." The room went silent. Even the air seemed to stop. The only sound was the sudden clatter of a glass tipping over, Gabriela's water glass. I looked toward her. She was pale but calm, wiping the spill with a napkin, her movements composed. Then she looked up at me. Her eyes held a strange mix of emotions I couldn't read. I didn't respond. I didn't give her a glance. I rose and walked toward Pablo under the stunned stares of the entire room. Standing behind Diego's chair, I said politely, quietly, "Mr. Lee, would you mind moving?" Someone audibly gasped. Once the dinner had served its purpose, it ended swiftly. I could only imagine the shockwaves this evening would send through the company, but what I kept thinking about was Gabriela. She once told me, "Daniel, people always strive for higher ground." Was this her version of climbing? When she and a dazed Diego came over to say goodbye to my father, she said softly, "Chairman Lee, we'll be leaving now." I didn't say a word. Pablo's eyes lingered on Gabriela's face, then shifted to Diego. His warm smile held for a moment, then slowly faded after they left. He turned to me. "What's going on between you and Gabriela?" I met his gaze, unflinching. "You saw it yourself, didn't you?" I said flatly. "She was taken by Diego. His mother likes interfering in other people's relationships. Seems her son's the same." I paused, then added, slowly and clearly, "Father." The last time I called Pablo, "Dad," I was 7 years old. It was the day my parents divorced. At the villa gate, I clung to his sleeve, crying, "Dad, why is Mom leaving?" Say something, but he didn't say a word. As a child, I didn't understand. But growing up, I learned the truth. Pablo and Diego's mother were childhood sweethearts. She left him for a wealthy man. Later, my dad married my mom, who supported him as he built his business from the ground up. And then, just when they had it all, Diego's mom reappeared, recently divorced, with Diego in tow. Pablo, still young and proud, resented her deeply, but he couldn't forget her. My mom never spoke ill of the past. She always upheld Pablo's image in front of me. She was graceful, dignified. After the betrayal, she left with her head held high. Pablo never married Diego's mother. He just kept her around, like a cruel joke, a reminder of the choices she made. Diego's original surname was Wang. He changed it to Li when he was 8, probably trying to win Pablo's favor. He and his mother settled into the villa like it was theirs. They didn't know I existed, but I knew about them. I found out when I was 8. I snuck back to the villa without telling Mom and saw Pablo celebrating Diego's birthday. He was holding Diego in his arms, smiling like a proud father, with Diego's mom standing beside him like they were a perfect little family. After that day, I never called him Dad again. Gabriela only knew that my parents were divorced. She didn't know I had taken my mother's surname, Daniel Mu. When I graduated, Pablo offered me a job in the company. He said, "I've had no other children all these years. Doesn't your mom know? You're my son. Who else would I give? This business too?" He added, "That aunt of yours has always wanted her son to come work here, but I've blocked it every time. Daniel, your father knows what he's doing." My mom never asked for a share of his wealth when they divorced. She took only what was hers and left with dignity. She could have everything that was rightfully hers and nothing more. I wasn't like her. Why should I give up what's mine? Honestly, the more it annoyed others, the more I enjoyed it. So after graduation, I joined the company with Gabriela. I started at the very bottom of the core business department and worked my way up. Pablo knew about Gabriela, paid attention to her, even praised her as young and full of potential, said her future was limitless. But let's be real. He only noticed her because I'd mentioned her to him before. My family relationships were messy, and I had planned to explain everything to Gabriela when the time came for Pablo to make things public. But she surprised me before I got the chance. When Pablo looked at me that day, there was something different in his expression. For the first time, he looked tired, like the weight of everything was finally catching up to him. He sighed and said, "It's my fault. I've wronged you." I just gave a quiet laugh. That's just a man being a man. Then I remembered what Diego had once said to me in the break room, trying to intimidate me. He told me that Pablo thought Gabriela reminded him of himself when he was younger. I guess he was right. They're alike in all the worst ways, ruthless, reckless, and always ready to burn bridges as soon as they've crossed them. And honestly, their judgment kind of sucks. I returned to the company 3 days later. By then, the news had made its rounds. When I walked back in, no one acted surprised. No weird looks, no prying questions, just a few more warm smiles than usual. Professionals know how to handle these things with subtlety, and for that I was grateful. It let me settle back in without a fuss. Only Bella was upset. She complained about how worried she'd been, only to find out I'd been pretending the whole time. I made it up to her with a seafood dinner. While picking apart a lobster claw, she gave me a side eye and asked, "So you're the real rich young master? Then who the hell is Diego?" I didn't hide anything. I explained the situation briefly, and her jaw nearly hit the table. "Oh, my God, that's disgusting," she said. "Pretending to be the boss's son? Walking around like he owns the place? I can't believe there are people that shameless." Then she leaned closer. "Daniel, while you were gone, a lot of people were gossiping with me. Can I tell them now? I mean, come on, Diego's been strutting around like he's royalty. If it were true, fine, but he's a fraud." I smiled, peeled her a piece of lobster, and said, "It's not a secret. If anyone asks, go ahead and tell them." I wasn't underestimating Bella's influence. By the end of the afternoon, pretty much everyone in the company knew the truth about Diego. A few days later, I went to the finance department to get a project budget signed off. That's when I saw Diego standing at Sister Bai's desk. She looked annoyed, pointing at his expense report. "Why are you charging the company for a handbag?" she asked. "This isn't going through, and I suggest you look over the rest of these. Don't try to pass off personal stuff as business expenses." Diego looked pissed, yanked the form off her desk, and stormed off. But not before giving me a dirty look, like I'd put her up to it. I hadn't said a word. After Pablo revealed my identity, I began working across departments to get a better grasp of the company. Naturally, Gabriela didn't get promoted to director. Albert is still remotely overseeing things from Nanjing for now. When I moved up, my old managerial role opened up. Bella needed a bit more time to grow, so we brought in an experienced business manager from another top company to replace me. When the changes were confirmed, tons of colleagues sent me congratulations via WeChat and text. Only 2 people stayed, quiet, Gabriela and Diego. They'd been avoiding me since I came back, maybe out of guilt or maybe something else. But I honestly didn't care. I had bigger things to focus on. In my mind, bridges are bridges, roads are roads. We were never headed in the same direction. They probably didn't see it that way. Diego eventually confronted me again in the break room. Same place, same coffee beans. But his vibe had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by anger. Standing behind me, he spat out, "Hypocrite!" Didn't respond, so he kept going. "Your mother acted like she didn't care, walked away from everything, said she'd never touch the Lee family's assets again. I actually believed you two didn't care. But turns out, you're just as fake. All high and mighty on the outside, but in reality, you're fighting to come back just like everyone else." He laughed bitterly. "If you were really above it all, you would have stayed gone. But here you are. Hypocrites." I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Dealing with someone like Diego, someone who never really got it, was almost entertaining. Bella once asked me if I planned to deal with him. And honestly, I hadn't. Because as long as he stayed in the company, he'd naturally become a problem for others, not me. Without Gabriela's attention, Diego had nothing. I never saw him as a rival. He wasn't even close to being one. Looked at him with a calm, almost pitying gaze. "Diego," I said, "stop talking nonsense. Look at you, all worked up. I just reclaimed what was mine, and you act like I stole your heart or something. If I were you," I added, "I'd go home and tell your mother to come up with better tricks to impress the old man. It's kind of sad. After all these years of sucking up to Pablo, all you've got is a modest monthly allowance, no house, nothing. But don't worry," I smiled. "Now that I'm in charge, you and your mom can keep your allowance. Think of it as a reward for keeping Pablo entertained all these years." His face went from red to purple to pale. Then suddenly, a grin crept across his face, like he just remembered a trump card. "I can't out-talk you," he said. "But I'm not empty-handed either. That girlfriend you loved for 7 years, she's still mine, isn't she?" I didn't even blink. "Trash belongs in the trash can," I said. "If she's yours, she's yours. That's nothing to brag about." Maybe Diego really liked Gabriela. Or maybe he just saw her as a stepping stone. She was young, already, a manager, and had Pablo's favor. In his mind, being with her meant having a shot at climbing higher. But the truth is, they were perfect for each other. Both faking it, both using each other, and in the end, both ending up with nothing but regret. Honestly, kind of poetic. As I finished speaking, I was done with the conversation. I looked at him, tired but composed, and said clearly, "This is the last time I'll be this polite to you." "Diego," I said flatly, "I hope you've got enough sense to keep a low profile in this company. Because I promise you I won't always be this patient." Tears welled up in his eyes, but I wasn't Gabriela. I didn't feel sorry for him. Not even a little. I just stood there, watching him break. And strangely, it felt satisfying. His tears didn't move me. They just confirmed what I already knew. Some people only understand consequences when they're standing face to face with them. Gabriela's resignation came soon after. I wasn't surprised. There wasn't really a reason for her to stay anymore. She followed all the standard procedures, and I didn't interfere. Not until everything was finalized. On her last day, she sent me a message asking if we could talk. I wasn't sure what there was left to say. The night Pablo had announced my identity, she had also messaged me, saying she was waiting outside my apartment. But I didn't go home that night. Pablo had asked me to stay at the main house to go over some company matters. I never responded to her message, and after that, she didn't reach out again. Still, maybe because she knew this was truly the end, she showed up anyway. Gabriella always had a calmness about her. Maybe that's what made her so successful, the ability to pretend nothing ever happened, even when the truth was burning underneath. When she stood at my office door, her expression was composed, almost friendly. She looked at me and asked, "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. She walked in and handed me a coffee like it was just another day. We stood side by side in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city. The lights were on across every skyscraper, each one like a star in our own little Milky Way. She sighed beside me and said softly, "Do you remember when we first started here? Almost 5 years ago. Just the two of us, fresh out of school, standing in a place like this, dreaming big." I remembered. She'd been handed meaningless tasks at first, but she fought her way up and closed a $1 million deal all on her own. That night, even though she was pale from drinking too much to celebrate, her eyes sparkled when she looked at me and said, "Daniel, let's build a home together in this city." But that deal, it was handed off to her boss, and she got a measly 500 yuan bonus. She used it to treat me to hot pot. I still remember the steam between us, and her voice, small and unsure for the first time. "How long do you think it'll take for us to make something of ourselves?" That same night, I went to see Pablo. Since he divorced my mom, she'd never touched his money. And though he gave me a credit card with no limit, we never used it. That was the first time I ever asked him for help. And it was for her. Pablo was surprised. He smiled, almost proud. But then he said something I'd never forget. "Daniel, if she can't handle something this minor without help, she's not worthy of being a daughter-in-law of the Lee family." Still, he watched her, mentioned her in meetings. His approval opened doors, and Gabriella, she took those opportunities and ran with them. She didn't need me to rise, and maybe along the way she stopped needing me altogether. She looked out at the lights and whispered, "How did we end up like this?" I scoffed. "Gabriella, don't start playing the nostalgia card now. I understand chasing better opportunities, but don't insult us both by pretending you didn't know exactly what you were doing." She gave a faint laugh, then turned to look at me seriously. "Can't we at least be friends? Just ordinary friends, Daniel? I betrayed you, and you hid things from me. Doesn't that make us even?" I shook my head. "Even? What exactly do you think we're evening out?" She didn't answer, so I kept going. "If I weren't Pablo's son, where do you think I'd be right now? I watched you cozy up to the chairman's son while I was pushed out, resigned under pressure. I signed a non-compete agreement. You knew what that meant. I couldn't even stay in this industry. I gave everything, my work, my energy, my loyalty, and in the end it was just fuel for you and Diego to climb higher. When I was jobless, wandering the streets, wondering what the hell I was going to do next, were you and Diego living it up in some downtown condo, drinking wine and laughing about how it all worked out? Now you're standing here asking if we're even." I looked at her face, pale, unsure, for the first time in years. Then I smiled, cold and distant. "There's no even, Gabriella. You owe me, and you always will. I'm not interested in playing the bigger person. I'm not forgiving you. I'm just done. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. If we meet again, we'll be strangers." I checked my watch and turned slightly. "It's time for you to go." She left quietly, her steps uncertain. In all the years I'd known her, I'd rarely seen her look so lost, but this was the path she chose. Later on, I ran into her once or twice, at industry events, summits. By then, I had taken Pablo's place. People treated me like a star. Gabriella stood on the sidelines, starting over with a new company, slowly working her way back up. She no longer had the title, the prestige, or even the access to speak to someone at my level. One evening, over dinner, Pablo casually mentioned Diego, said he'd been tricked out of both money and affection, called him a fool. I never found out when Gabriella and Diego broke up. But honestly, it wasn't surprising. When two people come together for self-interest, they'll split for the same reason. I sat there holding my tea, looking out at the garden. Spring had deepened. The flowers were in bloom again. Another year had passed, and everything that once felt so sharp, so painful, had faded into quiet memory. The past was over, and I had finally moved forward.